My mom died this morning. That's what the little girl said to me, in my own lobby, under my chandeliers, while the marble gleamed like it had better places to be. And, yeah, that happened. It cut through the hush of the house like a dropped glass. I turned, and there she was, no taller than the banister rail, hair braided into two tight lines. A black and white maid's uniform pinned and hemmed to fit a body that hadn't finished growing yet, clutching a silver bucket so hard her knuckles went pale. I run a place where perfection is expected and mistakes have nowhere to hide. But nothing. No quarterly review. The man people point at when they whisper millionaire like it's a diagnosis, the one who owns this mansion and the companies that keep it warm. I've spent my life making fast decisions. Sharpening edges, trimming fat, the whole story, you know what I mean? The staff moves around me like clockwork. Doors open before I touch them. Glasses refill themselves. Nothing messy gets left where I can see it. Except that morning the mess was grief, and it stood right in front of me with a bucket and a voice that trembled on the last word. I bent down without thinking, enough to meet her eyes, and heard myself ask, "What did you say?" She didn't flinch, just swallowed hard and repeated it, softer. The syllables landing one by one like stones sinking in still water. For a second, I tried to assemble a more comfortable reality. Maybe I misheard. And the look in her daughter's eyes told me there was no mistake today. "Where is your—" I started, then stopped because the answer was the question. The house kept being itself. Crystal glittered. A Brahms piano line drifted down from a guest suite. A draft moved the flowers on the console table, and it felt obscene that the world can stay pretty while a kid's life breaks at the seams. Wickham says without my mom here I can't stay. I don't have anywhere else. She finally looked straight at me, and I saw all of it. The held-back tears, the stubborn chin. The lesson no child should learn, that life can take everything and not apologize. "What's your name?" I asked. "Maya," she said, barely above a whisper. "Where did you sleep last night, Maya?" "In the laundry room," she said, so simply it knocked the air out of me. It was warm there. Something tightened under my ribs. Not pity, not exactly. More like a wire pulling me toward the only decent thing in reach. My lawyer would have waved a dozen risks in my face. My PR director would have said optics, liability, procedures. But none of them were there, and it was my house. I straightened, aware of how it probably looked. The master of the place hunched over a maid's daughter in the middle of the lobby, and decided I didn't care. "I can work," she rushed on, reading my hesitation. "I can clean more. I won't be in the way. Just don't send me away tonight." "Come with me," I heard myself say, my voice calmer than I felt. She followed me through halls lined with faces of ancestors who would have had opinions about everything, past doors she'd only ever closed from the other side, into my study where the fire threw soft light against dark wood. I opened a drawer, took out a velvet pouch with spare keys, weighed them for a second, and put them in her small hand. "Guest suite. 3rd floor," I said. "It's yours as long as you need it." She looked at me like I'd handed her the sun, lips parting, words failing, and the tears finally came, fast, hot, honest. "You'll have a warm bed," I added. "Your own bathroom, meals sent up. No more laundry room. I'll speak to Mrs. Whitcomb. No one sends you away." Fingers curled around the keys as if someone might try to steal them. And for the first time since she'd walked up to me, she seemed like what she actually was, a child. Over the next days, the house learned the shape of her presence the way it learns a new symphony. The chef, Raphael, slid extra pancakes her way and pretended not to notice. The gardener, Elias, tipped his cap when she walked by with a book. Even Whitcomb, iron-spined and rule-bound, stopped glaring at Maya like she was a smudge on the baseboards. Maya still worked small tasks. Because it's who she is, dusting the library railings, folding napkins beside the kitchen radio, humming a half-song she never remembered finishing. Then came the pushback. It always comes. A woman from social services, Ms. Carver, arrived with a clipboard and kind eyes that had seen too much. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry for your loss," she said at the door like the grief belonged to the household itself. "But the law is the law. A minor can't reside here without a legal guardian on record." Behind her shoulder, I could feel Whitcomb's posture relax. Not because she wanted Maya gone. She just likes rules the way some people like jazz. "I'll be the guardian," I said too fast. "That's not how it works," Miss Carver replied. a careful voice for a man used to getting his way. There are checks, a home study, background, court approval. I said, you can write that I insisted, and for once in my life I didn't care if a note in a system called me difficult. Ms. Carver held my stare long enough to make sure I understood the risk, then surprised me with a small nod. I didn't hear that, she said, tucked a form on my console, and gave me a list that made my head spin. Fingerprints, classes, court dates. Acronyms like CPR and GL and CASA, a whole alphabet built to decide where a child sleeps. That evening, in a house that had always been a museum of control, I learned to make hot cocoa on a gas range without burning the pan. Maya handed me a mug, steam curling in the air, and said, my mom used to say people show who they really are when they think no one's watching. And the thing about that line is it didn't sound like a child repeating wisdom. It sounded like a daughter reporting the world as it is. The storm hit the city a week later. A heavy white hush that made the roads vanish and turned the mansion into its own island. We stacked wood, shared soup at the kitchen table, listened to pipes complain in the walls. Somewhere between counting candles and finding extra quilts, Maya produced a crumpled envelope from the pocket of that hemmed-down uniform, an envelope with my name in Naomi's careful hand. She was going to give it to you when she got better, Maya said, voice thinning. I sat by the fire and read a letter that wasn't long but knocked everything sideways. Naomi writing that she knew her time might be short. Make sure Maya finished school and never had to earn a bed with a mop in her hand. It wasn't a legal document, but it was the truest contract I'd ever signed. The next morning I called my lawyer and told him to stop sounding like a lawyer. We drew up papers. I sat through a class in a church basement with other adults who wanted to be better for kids who deserved better. I got fingerprinted. Maya learned that Raphael will teach you omelets if you ask twice, that Elias talks to the roses because a person should practice kindness somewhere. Like the word could shame me back into the version of myself that never made room for anyone. Reporters noticed Maya at my side in a simple white dress, whispering to each other, typing fast. I took the microphone anyway. I thanked donors, delivered the lines I had to deliver, and her spine grew an inch right there. The applause was uneven, some enthusiastic, some polite, a few confused. But it didn't matter because when we stepped off the stage, she looked at me and asked if her mother would have liked the music, and I told her Naomi would have loved it, Brahms and all. Here's the part that sticks with me, the part that plays in my head when the house is quiet and the fire is low. After the gala, while cars lined up under the portico, Ms. Carver showed up again with an envelope of her own. Good news, she said. Temporary guardianship approved pending the hearing. And before I could exhale, she added, there's a woman who reached out. And I realized the story I'd been telling myself, that I'd rescued someone and now we'd live inside that clean ending, wasn't the real story at all. The real story is messier and more honest. A girl who lost her mother found a warm bed and a stubborn man who refused to let her sleep beside machines. A staff who learned new habits of watching out. A system that can be both barrier and bridge, a letter that asked for decency and got something like love. The last scene isn't me playing savior at a microphone. It's Maya asleep upstairs with a book in her lap and a court date on the calendar and a future we'll have to negotiate room by room. Where a girl's humming drifts down a hallway that used to echo. Tell me what you think. Did I do the right thing when I said she stays that first night? Should a house like mine be a refuge, or did I cross a line? What does justice look like when family, money, and community collide? Drop your take, argue it out, share where you're watching from. And tell me where you draw the line between rules and mercy, because this story, like most true ones, doesn't end. It keeps asking who we want to be when someone smaller than us says, I have nowhere to go.